Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to the Global MedTech Regulatory True Quality Summit Series. I feel like I'm going to start with a few housekeeping items. So I feel like some of you are probably hearing this for the 12th or 15th time, but in case you're joining us for the first time, just as a good way to get us started, if you missed the previous session overviewing the Israeli MedTech landscape, you can watch that recording on demand. And we're excited to have you all join us for this presentation, reducing friction between companies and regulatory bodies. And as we all are living this process, certainly nothing we want to do to add more difficulty to an already challenging process. So this topic should be near and dear to all of our hearts. This session will run for 35 minutes. The presentation, I should say, will run for about 35 minutes, and then we've left 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if anything hits you in the head around a question or a comment, or if you want to share some experience that will benefit all of our listeners, please click on that chat button towards the bottom of your screen and put that in there, and I will field those questions for our presenter, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. This session is being recorded, so it will be available, and the slides will also be available on the virtual summit website following the event. So with that, let's get started, and I'll do a short introduction of our presenter, Simon Wieser. Simon has a background in applied physics and developing cochlear implants as an R&D engineer for more than 6 years. He then moved to TÜV SÜD to strengthen his QM and regulatory background starting in 2019. As an auditor for manufacturers of active medical implants, Simon is in contact with small startups as well as multinational enterprises who seek to be certified according to the MDR, ISO 13485, or MDSAP, or others. So Simon, welcome. It's great to have you join us, and let me turn the presentation over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me here. Really glad to talk, and thanks for the introduction as well. So welcome to the talk. Today we're going to hear a little bit about the current environment that we're living in. The talk is going to focus a lot about MDR, but many of the topics also apply to other areas, of course. Second, I'm going to give you a short peek behind the curtain of a notified body. It sometimes seems like a bit of a secretive word, but actually it is not, and I'm glad to share some of the ways that we work. Third topic is MD codes. If you're not familiar with that right now, don't worry. It will come up a few times during the talk, and then a short take-home message for the day. As Mark already said, I'm glad to also hear your questions and inputs after the talk. So I'm looking forward to that. So the current environment that we're in, we're kind of on a treasure hunt, I would say, for MDR implementation. The treasure, of course, being successful transfer from MDD/AIMDD to the MDR before May 2024. So not too long to go. And in this treasure hunt, of course, TÜV SÜD and all other notified bodies, they are depicted here as the ship sailing. And of course, this could also apply to you as companies trying to navigate the MDR. And there are some pitfalls along the way, like the notified body capacity. ND here is a notified body. I'm going to come to that in the next slides as well. Then the guidance papers, they are constantly coming out. We're getting new requirements on the go. We are living in a world that is not certain, where things are changing on a regular basis, I have to say, and not everything is very clearly defined. So we have some things which are open for interpretation, and these things need discussion. So we're living in a really volatile, uncertain, and complex environment. UDEMED still not ready to go, still in the making. And the treasure, I would say, in the end, is the successful MDR implementation. This is where we all try to get to, both you as a client and we as a notified body, of course. One thing I have to add here is that there sometimes are rumors or wishes that the postponement of this deadline might come, or that the May 2024 is not a fixed date. But everything that we hear from the EU, from the Commission, is that this is not possible. So it is very, very unlikely that this deadline will be moved. So we are closely connected there, and everything we hear is that this deadline will stay. Yeah, the result, of course, everyone wants to bring the device on the market. We try our best to service all the companies that request the assessment. Is that we have a rising tension between authorities, notified bodies, and manufacturers. While on the other hand, of course, we do need close collaboration between all of these actors. So yeah, so one more slide, which is not just about the suit, but about all of the notified bodies. And the important thing is here in the center, I should just show the number of certificates that we see expiring in the next years. So the number is already rising. There are a lot of certificates expiring next year, but this number is going to explode in 2024. So of course, not all of these certificates need to be renewed, but a lot of them need to be. And in addition to there being a lot of certificates which need renewal, also the assessment has become more and more demanding. So it's more time consuming to assess these devices. Notified bodies have reacted. They were hiring a lot in the last years, and they are still hiring a lot. There have been more than 2,000 employees hired for notified bodies in the past 5 years. This graph, I think, also shows it pretty well, the number of people employed at the notified bodies. And this is also, again, not just DIFSUIT, but notified bodies overall, is rising rapidly. But if you compare it to the other graph, it's not quite keeping up with demand. So yeah, we saw a 2.25-fold increase in the last 5 years. And we are still in high demand for assessors and auditors at the notified bodies. Yeah, and the second topic, the time that we need to assess a file actually also increased, and with the MDR it has gotten more and more effort to get a device on the market. We can see that only 4 projects were finished within less than 6 months. 43 projects took between 6 months and a year, and 53 projects, or 53, let's say, % of the projects take more than 12 months to finalize. And if you are a small company putting your first device on the market, chances are that you will be in this bracket with the bigger than 12 months, because I think the first device often is really a big challenge. Yeah, there's a lot of things, small things also that can just increase the time that it takes to finalize the assessment and the review. So I would say there are a lot of tips and out there, like to become whole first, let yourself be broken. Of course, this might be true if you're in an existential crisis, but this is not a regulatory strategy that can work out for any company. So don't listen to all the advices out there, but there are some good advices out there as well. Time is precious, definitely is one of them. So first, let's say takeaways, I would say from the environment that we're currently in would be to really plan ahead. And of course, you're all doing that, but don't just plan ahead and keep those plans to yourself. If you know that you want to bring a device on the market within the next year or the next 1.5 years, maybe even the next 2 years, communicate this very early to your notified body, and make sure that they have the resources also to do the review at the time where you have planned it. So we can already see that the wait times are increasing. When you submit a file to a notified body, they will typically not look at it right away. They will tell you when they have availability to look at it, and then look at it as soon as resources are available. If you know already at what time you will bring your device to the market, then definitely let your notified body know, so that that they can plan ahead, so that you can also plan ahead, and in your plans also include some buffer time. If the first timeline that you had for your device is to have it on the market 6 months after submission, that is a really tough timeline to meet right now. So my advice would be to plan some buffer time there, especially if you have a complex device which needs a lot of different reviewers to get it on the market. And I will touch on that subject a little bit later again. So yeah, with that being said, the environment we're all in, we're a very challenging environment. Yeah, I want to invite all of you to take a little sneak peek behind the curtain of a notified body. How do we actually work? What kind of people work at the notified body? How do they work together? And yeah, how do these questions that you get when you send us a file, how are they created, and where do they come from? Yeah, so I try to make this interesting. I hope I hope it's easy to follow, because of course, from my point of view, I'm inside the notified body. All of these things are clear now to me, but from the outside view, I hope and this is good to follow. Mark, yeah, also if there are some questions that pop into your head right away, please let me know.
Will do.
So yeah, if you talk to a notified body, your main contact points will be the product specialists, and they are responsible for assessing the technical documentation and also changes which are related to the device itself. Then, of course, auditors, they plan the audits, perform the audits, and they also assess change notifications which are related to the QM side. Of course, there are project coordinators and assistants. They take care of a lot of administrative tasks, very important in the project planning. They create the timelines, they allocate internal resources, and take care of a lot of administrative topics, everything that has got to do with invoices and so on, for example. And I would say in the best case scenario, your notified body also has a central contact point for every client. One person that you can talk to that knows everything about your you as an organization, all of the projects that you have ongoing, and who can then distribute your requests within the notified body. And it is sometimes creates some friction if questions go to the wrong address, I would say, within the notified body. So, for example, if you send us a technical document and documentation, and you get a question from one of the reviewers, then of course you can answer this question directly with this reviewer. But then if you have a different question about the same project, this exact reviewer might not be the correct contact point. And so it would be better to ask the, let's say, project handler for this whole project if you have a different question about it, or if you have a question about a quote or something else. It might take either very long for you to get a response, or you might not get the response you're actually looking for if you don't address it to the right person, I would say. So just one thing to keep in mind: know your contact point, and also if you know your contact point, also distribute this information within your company so that everyone knows. So now that the people that I talked about, they are located here in the center of this picture in the notified body review team, I called it. And these are the people that you as a client will be in direct contact. So these are the people really facing towards the client. They will do a lot of the project work, but these are not all the people which are in the notified body. There are, after a project has been reviewed, there are reviewers, technical reviewers I have not mentioned yet. They will do a full review of all the reports that have been written, all the different assessments that have been made. And after the first review is done, there is actually a second review step, and this is the certification board. And this is an entity within the notified body, which is completely independent from these notified body review teams. So this certification board, usually is never in direct contact with you as a client, and you will probably not get a chance to talk to them directly. They will also perform a review of the whole file that we upload to them, and they have the final decision if a certificate is granted or not. So in the first stage, you will get questions from us, but in the second stage, we will be your ambassadors more or less within the notified body, and defend the report that we make to the certification board and make sure that yeah, we have reviewed everything, that it has been done in the right way. But there's also a good chance that there will be questions where also your input is required again. So also in a late stage, your input might be required again. And then, of course, last but not least, on the very right side, yeah, there's the national entities, the national competent authorities. And those competent authorities, they audit us as a whole, the notified body. So they will pull files from you that you submitted to us. They will look at how we reviewed it, and they will challenge our internal processes. So it's just like a normal audit. But you can already see that this means that your file might be reviewed 3 times, maybe 4 times in total. So this is a very, yeah, very intense process. And this also just shows that we as a product specialist, as auditors, we of course review you as a client, but we also get reviewed a lot. So so also the work we do is under a lot of scrutiny. And yeah, this is also, I think, maybe where some of the friction comes from, is that we just have to fulfill certain regulatory standards and processes where we don't have any room for discussion or compromise, actually. Yeah, so this is the process that you would typically go through if you want to bring your device on the market. First, the application, then technical documentation assessment, audit, maybe some clarification points, and then in the end, the certificate that everyone is looking for. I will quickly go through the process just to let you see how, yeah, what kind of steps we perform within the notified body, and say a little bit about these steps. First, it always starts with the application from your side. You ask us to review a technical documentation file, to perform an audit, and you have to submit the technical documentation at the same time. Just a second, I have to drink a bit of water. Yeah, then the product specialist already get involved, and this product specialist, he now has to be knowledgeable about the product that you submitted. So this is where these ND codes come into play for the first time. We look at your device, what kind of codes you assign to this device, and this will decide who within the notified body is allowed to review it. So the product specialist will start planning the project, will decide who has to review it, and with all of this information, the assistant usually will prepare the quotation and send it out to you. But this is not the end of the application phase. There is already a review step here, and the certification board will review the whole project planning to decide if really all the required experts are involved, if all the codes are correct that have been assigned, and if the classification, for example, also is correct of the device. So, as I said in the beginning, if these codes don't mean anything to you yet, I will get to that in later in the presentation. So I would say important here is that depending on the device and the risk level, there can be a lot of reviewers, different reviewers involved in the assessment. So there might be separate reviewers for the sterilization aspect, for biocompatibility aspects, functional safety. Maybe if you have MRI compatibility, that might be a different reviewer. And then there is one overall reviewer who will create, let's say, an overall report and references other reports. And also, of course, the reviewers, like the second review step, and those will, all of these reports will be internally reviewed. Yeah, so takeaway message here, I would say, is that the planning phase is really crucial of a project. If at the beginning of the project, we don't have all the information that we need to actually plan the project the right way, then it might happen that not all the correct experts are involved, or that not the experts with the right codes are involved, and that might lead to a lot of problems in a later stage of the project, or it might cause a delay of the project. So it's important to already send a lot of information with this application, and probably also go into a direct discussion with your notified body to make sure that all the information is understood and correct. And the second point is that even at very late stages of the project, where you might think all the questions have been answered, we're through it, we're just waiting for the certificate, even at this very late stages, some clarifications might be necessary just because of all of these review steps. Then, for the audit, it's a bit more straightforward, I would say. The auditor and the client, they gather a lot of information together. How big is the company? How many sites do you have? What kind of codes again do we need to cover during the audit? And that will be decided by all of the devices that you have. All of the codes will be put together. They have to be covered within a certification cycle. And during an initial audit, all of the codes also have to be covered. And then the audit plan is created. The client usually gets this audit plan way ahead of the audit, and often I can see that the clients, they just say, okay, audit plan is fine for me. They don't really, they look through it and they try to understand it, but actually this audit plan has a lot of important points for the auditor, and sometimes also here at this early stage, it is very important to give feedback to your auditor as well. So, for example, if you see that for an MDSAP audit, you have the supplier section at the very end of your audit, as it typically is, but your head of the supplier management department is always out on a Friday because he has to take care of the kids or something, then please let us know something like this ahead of the audit, because we can reschedule certain parts of the audit to different days, and we can accommodate if your resources are not available at the time slot where we have planned them. So we can adapt the audit plan definitely. Also, if you want to look at a certain technology or a certain device in manufacturing, and you already know that it's not going to be manufactured at the day where we are going into the production floor, please also let us know about that, because we can also adapt here. So at this early stage, please also give feedback. There's a review step here again. The certification board will check if the audit was planned correctly and release it. Then, of course, the audit is performed on site. There are probably a lot of things that I could say about this step, but it is very different for different companies. The only thing I really want to point out is that it's a big advantage if you're open with your auditors. Not only will it make the life of the auditors much easier, it will also make your life easier if it's I would say a combined effort to have a successful audit. Sometimes, we see a lot of different companies. Sometimes companies try to block, and they think, an audit, the goal is to have as few findings as possible and get through it smoothly. Actually, if you're open and let us have a really good look at your system, you might get one finding more than you usually would get, but the auditor then really knows how you work. He can give you much better feedback, and he will also be confident that you are actually able to fulfill the requirements set out in the regulation and in the standards. And also again here, it will definitely help both sides if the auditor is after the audit very well informed about your company, knows everything that you're doing, because he will also have to check if the content of the certificate actually matches what you do at your company. And if you and if the auditor has a very good view into your company, and he sees the wording on the certificate might not be 100% correct, this can be corrected at the audit and after the audit before the certificate is issued, but it is much more work to correct it at a later stage. Okay, after the audit, there's a follow-up where non-conformities have to be addressed by you. This step, I would say the most important thing is to really include a root cause analysis and a timeline for the CAPA actions that you want to close out. And in the end, there's another review step. The audit file will be compiled by the auditor, the lead auditor, and the co-auditors, and uploaded to the certification board. And once they have reviewed it and given their okay, the issue of the certificate, and the certificate will be issued. Yeah, so two messages here. In this early stage, before the audit, but latest during the audit, discuss changes and scope expansions that you want to perform. If you have changes planned in your production technologies, if you have changes planned in the kind of devices that you want to bring on the market, let the auditor really know as early as possible so that he can plan the review. For example, if you want to bring a slightly different kind of device on the market, it might not be a big change for the audit. But if you want to bring a new device on the market, new codes will be required. Maybe different auditors with different authorizations will be required. And if the auditor does not know that, he will plan for a normal audit. And then 1 or 2 months after the audit, you say, we want actually to bring a new device on the market. And then the auditor will say, yes, then we do have to perform another audit because we do have to also cover this other code. And so we have to do an additional audit. And if you give this information very early, it can be included just in the regular surveillance audit or in the initial audit. And it's much easier to bring additional devices in the market as well. Yeah, and the second point I already touched that, please carefully review the audit plan and give feedback on that. So now, finally, these codes that we have been talking about a lot. Yeah, for some people, they look like this matrix screen, just symbols without meaning, but actually they are very important for you and for the notified body. The first kind of code that you will encounter is the EMDN code. It is on the certificate. This, I think, is quite clear for most companies because they're really involved with that. But there is also metadata, which is connected to the certificate, which is not visible directly on the certificate, but it's of course just as important. So important for the manufacturer is the EMDN code, but I would say important for the notified body, these are the MD codes. So what are those? Every device has exactly one MDA or MDN code. So the A here stands for active, the N stands for non-active. And if you have a device, it will have exactly one of these either MDA or MDN codes. And then each device will have multiple MDD or MDS codes depending on the device. So these MDD or MDS codes, they are related to the technology, how they're produced, or special processes which are used during production, yeah, or within the company. And a few examples would be, yeah, okay. First this slide, sorry about that. So the MDA, MDN, MDS, and MDD codes, they decide who within the notified body is qualified to review a specific device or to perform an audit at a specific facility. For example, if I have to, or if we as STUFSUIT have to assess an active implantable medical device, then all the product specialists, reviewers, and certification reviewers have to be knowledgeable about active medical implants. And we have to be trained and qualified under this code. In this example, it would be MDA 0101. So if this code is not correctly assigned, or if the codes change, or you have additional devices, these have to be clarified, of course. Also, not for all devices, it is always very obvious which code is applicable. For most, it's very obvious, but not for all devices. So please, yeah, clarify this with your notified body and go into the discussion there. Now, this is an excerpt of a notified body designation form, and you can see usually all the MD codes are listed there, and it will show on the right side if this notified body, so in this case, it's not STUFSUIT, is allowed to review files which are assigned to a certain code. Not all notified bodies can review all files and all devices. If you have non-active, non-implantable orthopedic and rehabilitation devices, here in the first line, then you're fine. But for non-active, non-implantable ophthalmological devices, this notified body will not be able to help you. So you can see these are these MDN codes. They're really connected to a kind of device, type of device. Now, on the other hand, these MDT codes, they are not related to specific devices. Here, MDT 2001, for example, it means devices manufactured using metal processing. Or 2002, devices manufactured using plastic processing. Also, these MDT codes, multiple of these MDD codes can be assigned to a device. These MDD codes, they are not always very obvious. So just because you have a plastic component in your device doesn't mean that MDT 2002 is applicable. Just because you cut a plastic piece doesn't mean that you do plastic processing. But if you do injection molding, then you're doing plastic processing. And there's a lot of discussion points here, or gray areas in between. What kind of processes are done at your company? What kind of processes you maybe outsource to suppliers? And also these codes, it's very important to align with your notified body what kind of codes should be assigned to you as a company and to your devices. For example, if you have a change in your production, but you don't change your devices, you have a new technology, you suddenly start injection molding processes where you have bought it before. Sorry about that. Then additional MDT codes really need to be covered during the audit, and this is considered a scope expansion of your FQM certificate actually. Also at the bottom here you can see one example for an MDS code, MDS 1005. A very common MDS code is for steroid products, and there are different subtypes for this code. Sterilization with ethylene oxide or gamma radiation, for example. If you change your type of sterilization method, this is also a change your notified body should definitely know about. So takeaway messages here for this difficult topic, I would say. MD codes can have a big influence on your project timeline as well, because of course resources within a notified body are split between these MD codes. So if you have a code where a notified body has a lot of resources, might be that this device can be assessed pretty fast or very early. If you have a device where resources are scarce within all of the notified bodies, then it might be that your device can be assessed later on, or that it cannot be assessed as fast as you anticipated it to be. So when planning for timelines and codes, we come back to the very beginning, I think, of the talk. Really get into discussion with your notified body as early as possible. Make clear that you have the same understanding of the codes which should be applicable to this device, and ask for a timeline when this device can be assigned. If you have additional devices, it might lead to additional audit activities. It can be included with the regular audits if the information is known and available early on. Otherwise, additional audits might be necessary. And I think the other 2 points I touched on, if you change something in your technologies, that will lead to additional assessments. So we are already very close to the end of the talk. Before I finish it up with a take-home message, we have heard a lot about TÜV Süd as a notified body, or notified bodies in general now. But I want to let you know that TÜV Süd is more than just a notified body for assessing and auditing technical documentation review. We also perform a lot of testing, and we have actually increased our testing capabilities a lot. If you are a small company, a startup, a medium-sized company, and you cannot perform all of the testing in-house, you will typically outsource the testing. And and if you do outsourcing of your testing, of course, it's important to have a ISO 17025 accredited test lab. TÜV Süd has a lot of test labs in-house. We do biocompatibility testing, chemical characterization, microbiological testing. We also have our own MRI safety test lab, very recently opened, and of course we do a lot of electrical safety testing, electromagnetic compatibility testing for a wide range of devices, and everything you see listed here, is offered at TÜV Süd as well. So next time you're thinking about performing any kind of test, here is also listed all the standards that we cover. Don't hesitate to reach out to our testing team. They are independent of the notified body. They do not belong to the notified body at all. I also have to point out that it will not lead to any decrease in the assessment, of course, but those are ISO 17025 accredited test labs. So this is the standard that we are looking for. And one advantage is also that you get a lot of different tests from one hand. So on the left here, I gave you the contact point in case you ever need testing for your device. Just consider it. We have dedicated project handlers for this testing, and you will get an executive summary at the end. And with this being said, I wanna conclude my talk and say that we have a very big challenge ahead of us. We are taking it step by step. We are not taking it alone. We have to stay in close contact. You as a client with us as a notified body, you as clients within each other, share experiences as you do here, gather experience from all the experts in the field, and work as a team to just overcome these hurdles in a fast changing and uncertain environment. Together I hope we are able and to get devices to the market, and all of the safe and reliable medical devices, of course, to the market. And and with this, I wanna say thank you everyone for listening to me, and I'm really looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, fantastic presentation, Simon. Thank you so much. There was a lot of great information that was shared. We do have a bunch of questions that came in. I'll do my best to sort of group them, the like questions together, so we can get to as many as we can. Maybe just to begin with the end, though, I appreciate your comments around the testing aspects, because I think it's been my experience that our benefits to dealing with an agency, a certification body, or a notified body, and a testing agency, all out of the same group, it certainly improves communication and timing and those sorts of things. So thanks for that. So here's the first question from Christine. I may not use all of your names because some of these questions I'm going to bundle together, but since notified bodies obviously are not allowed to advise, they can't be consultants, what suggestions do you have for a strategy or a best strategy to get feedback on alternative approaches to the exact lettering of regulations?
Yeah, so that's a very good question and a difficult topic to touch on. We are not allowed to advise. We are allowed to give general feedback on how we interpret regulatory topics, and we are allowed to talk about device-related questions, or really company-related questions, as soon as we have an application and a submission, because then we can start a review of this file. And with the application, also a process is started at the notified bodies, where we can actually get a bit into more detail about this specific device. And before you decide which notified body you will go to, or just if you want to have regular feedback or very broad feedback about the regular topic, you will actually not get that from a notified body really tailored to your specific device. There are, if you follow LinkedIn, there are quite a number of talks by TÜV Süd, and I guess also by other notified bodies, where they talk about regulatory topics. And this is how we try to get our understanding, our interpretation of the standards and regulations also out into the field, and this information out. So I would say if you're a new customer which is not with a notified body yet, it is very difficult to get really direct feedback from a notified body.
Gotcha. There's a few people that asked a question around the technical documentation, and so I'll use this one. Hopefully serves them all. You said that the manufacturer's technical documentation that's already reviewed by a notified body may be reviewed again by other competent authorities or whatever certification activities during the audit of the notified body.
Yes.
Does it also mean that a certificate granted to a manufacturer by the notified body could be revoked by the CA? And what happens when the CA does not agree with the NB decision?
I don't think that has ever happened. At least I'm not aware of any occasion where this has ever happened. I would say in the most extreme case, there is a theoretical possibility for that, but it's not likely at all. The thing is that we as a notified body will get into a bit of trouble if we release a device to the market where the competent authority, the national authority for Germany, that is the ZLG, do not agree. So they will write a finding against the suit, and we will have to address it. If there was really a big oversight in the review, it might lead to a condition on the certificate, and there will not be just a complete removal of the certificate. Usually there will be some time to react and address this topic.
Great. So we've got a number of people that are asking the question about, as you were presenting around the audit process, wondering what the deliverable is during the audit release step.
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, what is the deliverable during the audit release step that you had in your slide on the audit, the phases of the audit?
So the very last step for the certificate release?
Nope, this was during the slide you had on the audit. There was the 4 boxes on the audit, and one of them was titled audit release.
So it's just after the planning, the second step.
Yeah, there was the second one, right?
Yeah. So in this audit release step, the whole audit is planned already. We have a timeline, how long the audit should be, which auditors should be doing the audit, and what kind of qualifications they have. Which auditor is going to cover which topic, how long each topic is going to be covered, and which clauses are going to be covered. All of these planning steps, and they have certain requirements behind them, and those requirements come from the ISO, but also from MDSAP and MDR. And in the release, different reviewers for all of these for the MDR or for the MDSAP, for example, we look at the audit that we have planned and check if it is actually planned correctly. Because you can imagine that planning such an audit is quite a complex task. It could happen that one of the sub clauses or one of the MDSAP tasks is missed, so that maybe it's not the right order at some point, or we have planned a little bit too less time for a certain task. Then this will be reviewed and challenged by the certification board, and once the reviewer agrees that the audit has been planned correctly, enough time has to be planned for all the tasks, and that all the auditors are correctly qualified to cover these tasks, then the audit will be released. One topic, for example, is that if the auditor does not have the correct MDT code, the technology code for a certain device, then he will not be allowed to cover the production tasks. He might be able to cover management tasks, but not the production task. And all of this is done in this review step.
Great. Let's see, time for maybe a couple of more. So here's a question that's kind of a broad industry question, so I'm not sure if you can answer it broadly or not, or what you've heard for rumors, but that they've heard that many notified bodies do only 3 rounds of Q&A. And that they stop the review if they feel they can't go on because there's too many questions and answers or questions to be asked. Is that a common approach that you've heard as well with notified bodies?
Yes, I would say so. This question and review tasks or rounds, which are performed by the reviewers, they of course are very time consuming and resource consuming. So we try to have a really, let's say, a limited number of review rounds, because usually we are planning for 2 rounds, I would say, and in some cases it will be 3 rounds. And then after this 3rd round, we either try to have a direct meeting and cover all the remaining topics, or we just say, no, it's just not sufficient and not enough to really get the device on the market. And if we just prolong the review and have 5, 6, 7 rounds, we just keep a lot of the resources blocked, which might go to better use otherwise. So I would say it is quite a common approach. And usually we plan for 2 rounds, and with the buffer time, which I mentioned, you should probably internally plan for 3 rounds. That might happen quite frequently. Yeah.
Got it. All right. So I got a quick one here. Where do you find the tables with the various MDA or MDN codes?
Yeah, so I can share a link to that. And also this these tables that I showed for the designation of the notified bodies, those are just freely available. So this is not a secret knowledge. These are just freely available on the EU website where all the notified bodies are listed. You can also look up these tables for all the notified bodies.
I'll cram one more in and then we'll call it a day here. It's an interesting question. In your experience, do software as a medical device reviews and audits take comparatively less time since many of the hardware system elements are not applicable, or they take just as long?
Yeah, almost just as long, I would say. The review timelines don't change too much with the kind of device that you review. I would say the timelines are very similar. Often then a lot of reviews are done in parallel if you have a very complex device. For software, I also want to point out, just to touch the subject, the cybersecurity is becoming more and more important. We are having a lot of resources dedicated to this topic. And we also notice that it's getting more and more important in the field. I would say, to answer the question, it does not reduce the time significantly.
Gotcha. Good answer. So apologies to those questions that we didn't get to. Thanks for submitting those questions. We'll capture them and see if we can't find answers to you for you afterwards. And but I really want to keep on time both for your for all the attendees, because the next session will be starting shortly. And we'll be learning from Joanne Lebrun about making headway despite the turbulence, regulatory requirements, quality, and your QMS. So also an interesting topic. Simon, thank you once again for your participation. Thanks all of you for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. It was a pleasure to talk here. And I'm happy for feedback also from all of the participants. Please drop me a note either directly via email or just on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining.